The next step in our process is to create an actual size composition layout. You're going to select the most effective composition plan from your thumbnail plans. It should have a strong focal point, a variety of different viewpoints and pieces, and use the composition space in an interesting and effective way. We're going to use the grid method to enlarge things proportionally and to place things properly in our composition. You're going to enlarge your thumbnail plan to the actual size that your final drawing will be. This will allow you to plan out all the real sizes, details, angles, and spaces of your final drawing. Because you're using your sketchbook for your final drawing, I want you to make the largest square that you can in your sketchbook. So most of you have a 9x12, so you'll make a 9x9 square for the final size. So here are my 3 composition plans. And I decided that this one here was the most effective based on a strong focal point from the contrast and the details of my large view and the direction provided by my supporting characters, the 2 smaller viewpoints. So I'm going to zoom in on that. So the first step is going to be to create a grid. Right now, you have a 4x4 square, so the easiest grid to create and the best way to break down this into simpler pieces is to use a ruler and measure off every inch on all 4 sides, and then lightly connect those marks to make a 4x4 grid. Now, the purpose of the grid method is to break down something that's complicated into more manageable pieces, especially if we're enlarging something and we need to get the spacing and the proportions and the details in the right place in our next drawing. So once you've gridded 4x4 on your thumbnail plan, you're going to, on your actual size paper, let's say it's a 9x9, you're going to create another 4x4 grid. Okay, so I did the math for you down here in case you need it. So if you have a 9-inch square, 9x9, right, then your halfway point is going to be at 4.5, and then every individual square is going to be 2.25 by 2.25. Okay, now we're going to enlarge things a little bit larger than double. Okay, so in any given square, you want to figure out how those details and lines and forms and angles are going to fit within your larger square. Okay, now you never just want to sketch from a sketch. Okay, because your sketch, especially a small thumbnail sketch, is just a really simplified second-hand view of the real object. You always want to look back at the real thing, or even a photograph of the real thing, especially if you have a large zoomed-in viewpoint to capture the details. Okay, so the first thing that I recommend is in your grid, use your sketch just to create a light framework of where everything goes. Okay, zoom in a little bit on that. This will allow you to lay out the boundaries of where your details are going to be placed when you look at the real object or the photograph. Okay, so I went through square by square and translated as best I could, just in sketchy form, fairly light, all the information that was in my thumbnail plan onto the larger size. Okay, you can see it's simplified. It's not nearly as detailed and realistic as I want it to be, as I need it to be for my final composition. Okay, remember this sketch, the actual size sketch, that's the real size of the final, okay, should be a detailed blueprint. You want to problem solve and give yourself a chance to practice all the realistic details, angles, everything that's going to make your final value drawing, once we add a full range of value, as realistic as you can. Okay, from this sketch, we don't want to leave it at that. Okay, from this sketch, you're going to look at the real object, and you're going to look at your photos, and you're going to create a much more detailed set of contours. Okay, they can be sketchy. Again, don't worry about value at this point. We're going to talk more about choosing a particular light source for every individual viewpoint. They don't need to match. You're going to create a lot more dynamic contrast of lights and darks if you have different light sources for your different viewpoints. Okay, but you do want to capture all the details of the contours of each object. All right, again, not just a sketch to a sketch, but laying out your lines nice and light. And now don't misunderstand what this is. This is step one of your drawing, and then you'll add your details right into the same drawing. Okay, you don't have to do two separate sketches. It's just easier for me to show you than for me to time-lapse the whole thing and have you watch me draw the details in. Okay, so this type of detail, okay, this type of accuracy in terms of what you're observing and what you're putting in place, okay, should be evident in your actual size sketch. All right, you want to problem solve all the visual issues so that you can move into your final and have a lot of confidence and have everything figured out. Okay, and then the last step will be to transfer using the grid method again, very lightly, so we can erase it on our final composition paper. To transfer all of these detailed lines onto our final paper, and then we'll talk more about value and really selecting a set of light sources that's going to add a lot of interest and add a lot of contrast and energy to your final artwork.